Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Tabs on Tap. I'm Tabitha Hassell, of course. I feel like it's Monday. I don't know about you guys, but not being around yesterday seemed like such an entirely long day. I do hope that you guys had a good day. We got lots to talk about today. We have Colonel Joe Adams of the Washington Guard joining us. He's going to join us at 8 a.m. as usual. Can't wait to talk to Colonel Joe Adams. Lots of stuff to talk about today. I mean, the news has been crazy, as you guys know, as always. Nothing ever changes. There's a lot of things I want to talk about today. And part of that I want to talk about is safety. We are not safe. I just hope you know that. We are not safe. These folks on the very far left, they will do anything they can to attack us and to harm us. And they simply just don't care. They don't care. They don't care. I just heard from somebody I know who may or may not be listening this morning about, almost being attacked in North County. Had he not been carrying as he was driving, he might not be here with us today. I saw an incident over the weekend with Charlie Kirk, one of the chapter secretaries that he has at one of his it's colleges. Charlie Kirk has a lot of these. Well, I should say the president of the chapter and the secretary of the chapter at a college was attacked. We're going to get into that a little bit further. I mean, it's like, what is happening? We see everything that's going on around us, people attacking Teslas, but it's not just Teslas. It's people with Trump bumper stickers. It's people who have American flags. We're really at a different type of state of war, in my opinion. They're coming after us hard. There is no question about it. I don't know what we're going to do to fix these situations. I really don't. It's a very difficult situation that we're in. I'm glad we're going to have Colonel Joe Adams today to talk about it, because quite honestly, I don't think you should feel safe. I really don't. And we're going to get into that. Chick days. Now, we don't have to talk about this too much, but it's chick days at Rural King. I didn't even know. The other day I went to Rural King and they had, I mean, people were flocking in there to buy all the chickens. There were pretty much no little chicks left, but they said they were going to get a new supply in. They had a lot of little activities for kids, special prices on rabbits and chickens. And, chickens, you may not have the space for chickens. You may not think you need chickens, but trust me when I tell you, you do. You absolutely do need some chickens in your life. Because you know what? Our food system's poisoning us. I am 100% convinced our food system is poisoning us. Absolutely convinced of it. And I really think that, yes, it's more expensive to have chickens than it is just to go out and buy eggs. But isn't your health worth it? In my opinion, yes, your health should be worth it. Good morning, Karen. Happy to see you here. Hopefully, the show is running good on Facebook. I got a little reprimand the other day. So I haven't seen anybody comment yet from Facebook. Hopefully, you'll be able to. They just don't like me over there. I don't know why. It's kind of funny because I have dreams about Mark Zuckerberg all the time. And it's always that we're at some kind of party and he's there and he's just hanging out. It's the strangest thing ever. It's like, what is wrong with me? I think that maybe Facebook is giving me some type of signal through my phone while I sleep about Mark Zuckerberg. But they do not like me over there. So who knows what's going to happen next over on the Facebook. And I do want to talk about the poisoning of our food today. I'm going to show you a little excerpt of a video of an ingredient. Oh, there's Mary. She's on Facebook. It's working over there. Dottie says, need to be on X. Dottie, I couldn't agree with you more. Every person at this point needs to be on X because, as I have said many times, we're going to talk about Signalgate. But, quite honestly, there's nothing on Signalgate that wasn't said on X. So, these days in the state of transparency we're in, when we have big names like, General Mike Flynn or Colonel Douglas McGregor, Elon Musk himself, Donald Trump himself, we have these sources posting live information all across platforms. Now, Facebook doesn't carry those messages, but X does. If you're on X, you already know what's going on. Signalgate isn't even a big deal at all if you're already on X. And so that's why everyone needs to switch over. Everyone needs to switch over. Even if you don't, you're really missing out. Because I'm over there looking at X. I'm like, holy cow. They have the news before it's news. It really is very interesting. But we're going to talk about Signalgate. I'm sure most of you know what Signalgate is by now. and the poisoning of Americans. So lots to talk about. I'm just going to jump into a couple things before Colonel Joe Adams joins us. Good morning, Vernon. Good morning, Mary. And Mary says, I could get an X, just not sure how to fully use the comments. Yeah, it takes some getting used to. It really does. There is a little spot on there where you can comment. It looks like a little thinking thing, and you hit that, and it'll allow you to reply to whatever that person is saying. And you can actually have a conversation through, replies on X, just like you do on Facebook. They can't be quite as long. I mean, they can be quite as long, but you're not going to see them in the same way. Comments have to be, they're cut off at a certain number of characters, unfortunately. That's the only downside, I think, to X. Or maybe that's an upside. I don't know. If you have something long to say, you just have to write out multiple comments. But I do want to talk about something else important before Colonel Joe Adams joins us here shortly, is that I'm not going to have a show tomorrow or Friday. And next week, we're going to be rolling out something entirely new. And I'm going to change the show to a 1-hour show from 8 to 9 a.m. And I'm going to, of course, explain why this is happening. My body needs to rest. Some of you know that I had my PET scan yesterday and my results were not positive. Well, actually, they were positive, not positive in my life, but positive on the scan. And so those are, I'm going to explain a little bit because I think it's important and it might help with some new directions I might be going in on the show. I think we're being poisoned. I really do. I think that our government has been working against us for so long that our water supply is poisoned, our food supply is poisoned, our medications are poisoned. And, I'm at this kind of weird crossroads where I'm not at a high risk for a malignancy. I'm just not. No one in my family, well, my biological father has prostate cancer, but that's not the same thing. And so, some of you know how my journey has been going, that it started out in October. I had some lung nodules, had a hard time breathing, had a CT scan. Showed that these nodules may or may not be, indicative of something more. So I had another CT scan in 3 months. They said, oh, looks like it could be, a malignancy or metastasis. I'll never be able to say that word correctly. So I had a PET scan yesterday, and I'll have to say, I was a little bit surprised when my results came through. And basically from here to here, things are not good. But we don't know what it is yet. So the way PET scan works is that they inject you with this radio tracer. If you guys were here the other day, I talked about that. And the radio tracer, which is really a sugar syrup, because it goes, your sugar, when you eat sugar, when you have sugar in your body, it goes right to, inflammation or diseased cells or malignant cells. And so they put the radio tracer, they attach it to sugar, they inject it in you. You sit there for about 45 minutes while the sugar finds its way to all the bad spots in your body. Then you go and you do about 20 minutes in and out of this little scan, and it takes these different scans. And so I really didn't expect a lot to come out of it. And I was pretty surprised last night when I got my results that, I have a enlarged lymph node, which I knew I had. It's the right paratracheal lymph node. But I really expected it to be like, oh, nothing. But no, it's actually twice as big as what it was on March 10th when I went and had my other scan, which is really strange. And it had a very high hypermetabolic activity is what they call it, which means it glowed on the screen, along with the right side of my thyroid, and really from my brain all the way down through the salivary glands, all the way down my throat and into my chest. Now, that's not a big surprise to me because if you look up online, I'm a researcher. The right paratracheal lymph node gets its drainage from the head and neck. So you can think if you have a head or neck malignancy, that it's going to drain into that lymph node. So none of that was a big surprise to me. But what I do want to add is that just because you have a positive or hypermetabolic lymph node or other areas of your body absolutely does not mean that it's the big C word. It does not mean that. It can be inflammation, it can be sarcoidosis, it can be a lot of different things. So, I'm not jumping to any conclusions at all. It could be a lot of different things. And so my next steps in the process are I have to go and get two MRIs, a non-contrast and a on my brain, non-contrast and contrast. I have to go and get a ultrasound on my thyroid, and I have to go and get a biopsy on the lymph node. Now the good news is the nodules that were in my lungs, the original thing I went to get looked at showed absolutely nothing. I mean, they're there, but there's no metabolic activity taking place in those nodes. And Rich says, you're going through the same thing right now. You know, Rich, I'm glad you said that, because you know what? So many people are. Why? Because we are being poisoned. I kid you not. And I'm not just saying that. We are seriously being poisoned. Now, it doesn't matter whether my situation turns out to be the big C word or whether it's inflammation. I think it's probably more inflammation or autoimmune. But either way, why are our bodies acting this way? Why? It's because the food we're eating, the water we're drinking, the dyes and the chemicals we're putting in our body. That's what it's all about. And that's the only reason why I'm talking about it, is because I could keep it quiet, not tell anyone. Absolutely not tell anyone. But I'm talking about it because it's important to know that we are being poisoned. That's all there is to it. There's a reason why the uptake in these type of situations are happening. And it's because and I'm a victim to it too. I go and I buy processed foods or things that are quick. Sometimes I like to cook, but there's also times when I just simply don't have time. I just don't have time. So what I'm glad about, though, if there is anything to be glad about, is that I'm going to at least be able to share this journey, because I am going to go full out, anti anything that causes your inflammation in your system. So anti-inflammatory. I'm going to go full out anti-inflammatory. I am going to find, the best parasite cleanse out there, and enrich you and people like you, anyone who's going through these same things, even if you just don't feel great, even if you just don't feel well. Look up an anti-inflammatory diet. Eat whole foods. Stop eating that junk they're feeding you at the grocery stores. Please don't. And fast food, definitely the worst of all the worst. Sugar is seriously poison. Do not put sugar in your body. And trust me, it's hard. It's hard. Cupcakes are one of my favorite foods, but it is really difficult. You just can't do it to yourself. And we have to start doing better. We really do. And we're not going to heal until we do better. And so we have to reach out. I think everybody needs to do an anti-inflammatory, and you have to do a parasite cleanse. I am absolutely convinced. We'll talk more about it another day. Robert, we need sun. There's a reason why back in the day there were solariums. You've probably heard of a solarium. And they used to put babies out in the sun. They still do in some countries. They still put babies out in the cold and out in the sun to kind of cure them, as they're infants, and build up their immune system. And we are just slacking here in the United States. And why? Because we're all busy. We all want the next bigger thing. We got to work our butts off to get something, a big house, a nice car. And then we're not giving ourselves time to recoup. We're not giving ourselves time to eat correctly or to exercise. And, so the route I'm going is that I am going to choose to go the route of natural food products, of anti-parasitics, of anti-inflammatory, and then we'll see how it goes. That's all we can do, is wait and see how things go. But of course, I will be reporting back on it. I think it's important to talk about, quite honestly. A lot of people don't like to talk about health issues, but I think if we can learn from it, then we need to talk about it. And Rich says, I was also told to stop eating red meat, which is really hard for me. Yeah, Rich, I'm with you. That is a tough one. I mean, everybody likes a steak, right? Or a hamburger or something like that. But, there's a lot of studies that say that red meat can actually cause inflammation, and it certainly can cause heart disease and things like that. But then I've also read studies that say none of that's true, that that's just more of the government propaganda. So I think we have to do what we think we need to do with our body. Then you go back and you get your testing and you see, is it worse? Is it better? What exactly is going on? But we have to jump into it. So, moving forward with the show, even though I'm not going to be here today, I mean, tomorrow or Friday, that is simply because I have got to rest. Whatever is going on, I've got to give it a little bit of a rest, and I've got a bazillion different doctor appointments to make. But, and I have to work on top of all of that. But going forward, again, starting next week, I'm going to have my show's going to be 1 hour, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. But I'm also going to be doing some extra shows, outside of this show, where we're going to talk about gardening and we're going to talk about independent topics. So, I might be here talking for an hour about whatever topics are most important, but I'm going to have some separate things and separate guests on outside of this show. So it'll be different, but it'll be better in the end. It will be better. Mary says, eat small portions of red meats. Robert says, methylated form of B vitamins. Robert, I ordered some methylated V vitamins, and what's funny is that somehow in shipping, I don't know why, who packages stuff in glass anymore? The bottle broke on its way here, and I have yet to reorder it, but I need to do that. I don't think people need to stop eating red meat, quite honestly. But I think everything, like Mary said, in moderation. Moderation is key. That is the key to everything, is moderation. I'm not saying you can't have a drop of sugar, you just have to do moderation. That's what makes a big difference. You have to get your body moving, more importantly. You got to get those cells going. So there's a lot of things on my plan. So we're just going to move forward and see where things take us. That's all we can do, right? That's all we can do. And so on top of that, Colonel Joe Adams is going to be joining us here in just a few minutes. It would probably help if I sent him the link to the show, which I forgot to do today. It's kind of funny. I was on here earlier, and I was thinking about Colonel Adams. And let me see. I'm going to play. You know what? While I figure this out and bring Colonel Adams in, I've got a lot on my mind today. I want to talk about something else really quick, and I'm going to play this quick video while we're talking about the poison in our food. And it is. If you start looking at these ingredients, I mean, it is absolutely crazy what they are trying to do to us. It is absolutely crazy. Sorry, I'm trying to find his information, but I will get this send out to Colonel Joe Adams. But anyway, I want to play this quick video for you. I know a lot of us have eaten cinnamon toast crunch, right? Well, allegedly it has an ingredient called TSP. It's called trisodium phosphate. So I'm going to show you this really quick video here, because this is exactly why you cannot trust the food system.
A toxic paint cleaner ingredient found in Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Come with me to Home Depot and check this out. Here we are at Home Depot at the paint thinner and paint cleaner section, and you can see there is TSP, but it's TSP substitute. It's TSP phosphate free. I talked to them. They stopped carrying regular TSP trisodium phosphate because it's toxic to people that are using it. So what I did is I actually ordered it. It's online at Home Depot. So why did they pull it? It says right here, harmful if swallowed or inhaled. This is the same TSP that they're putting in your cereal. It's harmful if it's swallowed. Why? Because it's a trisodium phosphate salt, and when you eat it, it breaks up in your digestive system to sodium ions and phosphate. And phosphate is toxic to your body, leading to neurological and behavioral effects, kidney damage, and cardiovascular issues. It can even interfere with calcium absorption, leading to weaker bones and osteoporosis long term. So for the love of God, if you see TSP on any food label, especially your kid's cereal, put it back on the shelf if you want to live a non-toxic.
Don't eat the poison. Don't eat the poison. That's the name of the game. Stay away from the poison. Are most people going to stay away from the poison? Probably not. Absolutely, probably not, unfortunately. But that's something we have to do. Either way, we'll be waiting. If Colonel Joe Adams is running a couple minutes late, it is all my fault. I forgot. What's so funny is I had the link ready to send to him this morning. And then, my brain, I just got sidetracked on something, and then I just didn't send it. And I got a lot on my mind today, I'll tell you that much. So that is exactly why. But something I'm hoping to talk to Colonel Adams about is Signalgate. I don't know if Signalgate is really that big of a deal. It's a big deal, I think, on good morning, Karen, on the part of the folks involved. We have Pete Hegseth. We have, of course, Mike Waltz. Now, Mike Waltz, he's the director of our national security. Now, I do have to say, I don't think it is in the best interest of the country to use an app to be having conversations. Now, Tulsi Gabbard, who is also on that conversation, said there was nothing that we discussed that was classified. But what's interesting about it is here we have the editor in chief, Jeffrey Goldberg of The Atlantic, which is of course a publication, who Mike Walls hit one of his assistants brought this person in to the Signal chat, which if you're familiar with The Atlantic, a lot of people don't know this, but many years ago, I was a recruiter and I recruited for the newspapers and publications, and I knew the editor in chief for The Atlantic, who's a really great guy, by the way. He lived in St. Louis and worked with a different group of newspapers, but they're a very liberal publication. So why would any assistant of our national security director, Mike Walls, bring in somebody into this Signal chat who is with a publication at all, let alone something like The Atlantic? It just doesn't make any sense to me. Was it sabotage? Is there going to be payback? Now, Trump says, mistakes happen. We're learning by those mistakes. And I know people have talked to me before and they say, well, if we're going to talk about something classified or things maybe I shouldn't be telling you, let's go on Signal. But nothing is foolproof. That just goes to show you. You think something is safe, but nothing is foolproof. Now they say there's an MI6 operative who is also in the Signal chats. I mean, how crazy is this? Who brought these people in? How did this happen? And I think it's not a big deal as far as the information that was revealed, which was about, a relationship attacks against the Houthis, which these days everybody knows what's going on at the time. So that's no big deal. But at the same time, it's like, it's a good thing maybe they didn't talk about some other things. How about that? So we're going to be bringing in Colonel Joe Adams with the Washington Guard. It's open forum with Colonel Joe today. See what's on his mind. Let's see here. Good morning, Colonel Joe Adams. How are you doing this morning?
Good morning, Tabitha. Good morning, all you patriots out there. Another day in paradise here in Washington, Missouri. So thanks for having me on.
Happy to have you. How is storm cleanup going?
We just completed it. We picked up our assignment from the emergency response organizers from the sheriff's department. And thanks to all the people that turned out, all the Washington Guards, men and women who spent their own time and their own effort and their own back-breaking work to get the job done. And we did a really good job. We primarily concentrated on the intersection of Highway 47 Highway 100 and 44. It was a disaster. And so now they're in the process of demolition and the insurance people and rebuilding that whole intersection. But we really got hammered. One of the stranger thing is I worked the back roads to see if other people had what was reported, and I came across this couple that were in shock. They were just standing there looking at their crushed barn. Wow. I asked them, has anybody been out here to help you? Well, somebody came by, and I said, well, what can we do to help you? And they wouldn't even talk. They just stood there and stared at their barn. So we were able to get people in there right away and get the barn raised and get their equipment out. So and they were very thankful. And I went back and visited them again. And tell them if they need anything further, just give me a call, and we'll send out some people and get it taken care of. But very successful. We got a lot of gratitude from the sheriff's department, and we just showed them when a community comes together, what's possible. We're just a lot of people show up like down in North Carolina, everything to help their neighbors, but they weren't organized. Well, we were already organized and trained to handle any situation. And facetiously, I kind of said, as much as we've trained, we kind of need a natural disaster. So I hope I didn't put the whammy on us, and we got.
Yeah, you brought it to us.
If I did, I apologize, but we're trying to make up for it. So anyway, it was really a really good community effort, and Franklin County's back on its feet, and we'll continue on and continue training.
I'm so happy. I'm happy to see Allison back on the comment line. Allison, we have missed Allison in her comments, and happy, of course, to see you, Colonel Adams, and Deanna there, and your producer in the background.
Yeah, he's back. Where's my cats?
And the other producers.
They were out all night. So.
we have another storm system potentially coming through. I think, what is it, Sunday? I can't remember which days exactly. I think Sunday. And hopefully nothing severe like that. That storm we had, that was a pretty good doozy. I don't really know if anyone really expected it to be quite that bad. I mean, a lot of lives lost, a lot of property damage. But, thankfully you, the Washington Guard, all of you are out there, doing such a fantastic job. And, Colonel Adams, you've been so busy. I don't know if you know exactly everything that's going on, but I have a question for you. You are familiar with Colonel Douglas McGregor. Of course you are. Do you trust him? Do you trust
Yeah.
him? If he makes a statement, do you trust it?
At this point, yes. And here's the thing about McGregor. When a person's right and has a record of being right, like myself, and that's not brag, that's just fact. McGregor has been in the same industry as I have for the last, how long I've been in this thing? 55
years.
Huh?
50 years plus.
My producer said I've been in the intelligence industry for 50 years plus, and I have. I started when I was 20 years old. Got an eye opening with naval intelligence. McGregor's been right down the pipeline. So who am I to say that he's wrong, right, or whatever? And he would have to have some pretty good information about Obama to make that statement. Now, you don't forget,
You knew
McGregor
exactly
and I
where I was going.
yeah, remember, McGregor and I were the two people that predicted that after the elections that Putin would go into Russia, and when everybody else said no way, no way, we
That's
said,
right.
oh yes way, and
Right.
we were right. But it's
That's
because of it's because of the collective knowledge and the community that I stay involved with the intelligence community, little bits and pieces, and talking to the right people. To me, it was obvious that Putin was going to go in. So McGregor's been right down all the way down the line, so I can't disagree with him now. I wish I was in the same room with him and found out what maneuvers he made to get that information. But
I would like to know. I would like to know too. My first encounter with Colonel Douglas McGregor is that I was on a show at the time, and I had been warning the people on the show with me that, hey, Putin is going to invade Ukraine. He's been warning about it for 6 months. It is going to happen. I was literally counting down the days, and then everybody told me I was wrong. Oh, you're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong. And then all of a sudden I heard Colonel McGregor make a speech, and he said exactly what I was saying. I'm like, there's my validation. And I'm glad I stuck to my point because I knew it was going to happen. And just as you did, we saw the writing on the wall, not to mention some of the people that we talked to. I have a great respect for Colonel Douglas McGregor, as I'm sure you do as well. And is, just like I respect you in what you have to say. And I'll tell you what, people were giving me a lot of flack on Facebook because I made a post, and I talked about on the show the other day, that Colonel McGregor made a very clear statement on, by the way, he's somebody you can follow on X for those folks who are out there on X, not sure who to follow. And he said Obama was just busted for laundering money in the Cayman Islands. And now by busted, he doesn't mean he was busted, he was arrested. It means this information was uncovered. And now we know the truth. And I absolutely believe it to be true.
I have to go with McGregor. So far he's been right down the line. So yeah, and it's believable knowing about Obama and his millions and millions. What's he 135 million he's worth now? Well,
Exactly.
if they think he's worth 135 million, you can probably double it.
I was just going to say that.
He's
No question.
He's just a crook, a Manchurian candidate, just a crook. I can't stand the guy. I did find it kind of, if all of these things weren't so serious, it'd be comical. If somebody wrote a novel about the two different things that's going on in this country, the Republicans and Democrats, it would be a comedy. These people are insane. When Trump called them just lunatics, I mean, well, how else can you describe them? So now, in the Democratic world, the people and the constituents, as far as leading people in the Democrats, AOC is now number one. Now,
I know.
Think about that. How mismanaged can you be that a former bartender, which I've got nothing against bartenders. You know, there's some bartenders, some of my best friends, believe me.
No question. I used to bartend. Yeah, no question.
Yeah, I think I always wanted to be a bartender. Anyway, I said anyway. I'm not supposed to. I got a big sign right here. Look, can you see this? I don't know if you can see this or not. See this?
Oh, that says don't say it anyway.
Don't say it anyway. Right? Well, there goes that idea. So anyway, think how desperate their community, their tyrannical community has to be AOC, for people actually in polls voting for AOC as the number one person over Kamala Harris and over Bernie Sanders. Wow, they are so lost.
They have lost their minds, and they're dangerous, Colonel Adams. They're dangerous people.
That's exactly what I was just going to say. It's comical, but it's serious. So because they're so comical and mismanaged, does that make them more dangerous or less dangerous? In my world, it makes them more dangerous.
100%.
Right. So
I don't know if you heard the show before you came on. Earlier I was talking about exactly that we are in danger. You can be walking around right now. This is the type of danger we're in. You could literally be out driving down the road, and for whatever reason, you might have an American flag sticker or a Trump sticker, or somebody might just not like you, quite honestly. And don't take this the wrong way, just simply because you're white. And that's not a racist comment to say. It's just that a lot of people look at white people and they assume that we must be conservative or Trump supporters, and they will come out and attack us. And it happened to a friend of mine just this weekend who just messaged me about it this morning. Thankfully they were able to stop the attack. But we are absolutely under attack by the radical far left.
Well, if they attack me, I'm going to end their career. So, yeah, I mean, they're insane. An example of how insane they are, when they have people like Maxine Waters in an elected position, and her big thing this week was she wants to have Melania Trump deported. So, that's like a Saturday Night Live skit, right? But I don't watch Saturday Night Live because I'm asleep by then. But anyway, what kind of moron, an idiot, would stand up there and say that when it's records proof that Melania's parents moved here and became legal U.S. citizens legitimately, and so did Melania. Maxine Waters says deport them just to get attention. She has nothing else. I still say she looks like one of those old shrunken heads from the Amazon.
Well, Jasmine Crockett's about to go down, Colonel Adams, because she is getting ready to, have a lot of bad flack coming her way. She assaulted. Did you hear about this? She assaulted a reporter. There was a reporter that was questioning her, asking her if she wanted to apologize for seemingly condoning violence against Teslas and against conservatives. And instead, she attacked the journalist, broke their phone, and they filed charges against her. And it's all caught on video. In fact, Laura Loomer was there and caught it on video.
They're nuts. They are lunatics.
Better believe it.
But that's what you get when you elect the wrong people. But the problem is that's the Democratic policy. The Democrats currently, their big platform is judicial tyranny. They're using those 235 judges to wage war against the Trump administration. And when they do that, they're waging war against America. These people are traitors and should be treated as such. I say deport their ass.
I agree.
That I have close connections to the transition team and all that, and we talk a lot. And I said, what if they turn this around and somehow through the Supreme Court, saying that due process was not given those murderous gang members that Trump deported, and they are actually forced to bring them back? What are they going to do with them? Because they didn't have their day in court. They didn't go before a judge.
They just brought some back yesterday.
Well, I would think it would be comical. And of course, I'm a twisted person. If they were forced to be brought back, then Trump should transfer them to the sanctuary cities and let them deal with them. But that's a sick thought. But that's what they deserve.
Well, it is, and there's some newer some kind of new news on that. Donald Trump is expected to sign an executive order ending sanctuary cities, and prosecuting any elected official that continues with their sanctuary city, regulations and so on, their rule of law. And there were some of the folks that were transported from Trinidad to El Salvador were actually returned yesterday. Now, it was mostly women and only a couple men, and I think that's for maybe other reasons than the fact of these judge overruling. But the DOJ yesterday issued a pretty interesting statement to these judges, and they said, you know what, especially Judge Boasberg, who this statement was aimed at, he is the one who, of course, is trying to stop Trump from deporting these people and demanding all of this information. And the DOJ said, nope, sorry, Judge Boasberg, it is not any of your business. You are not higher than the President of the United States.
Yeah, going back to those judges, when did they start using the?
Oh, Colonel Joe Adams froze up for just a second. I think he'll snap back out of it.
My connection,
Colonel Adams,
so
you froze for a second. Away. I'm sorry. Can you go back and repeat what you said?
Yeah. Okay. It's kind of embarrassing to admit this, but my grandfather.
Oh, well, we lost Colonel Adams. I'm not sure what happened. Probably an internet connection, but he will hopefully pop back in with us in just a moment. But he's, I agree with everything Colonel Joe Adams says. We'll await him. He'll be popping back in. Good morning, Jay Van Brown. Good morning, Manoj. Good morning, Linda and Jay. Happy to see you here. Jay says the Supreme Court already ruled on this before. It shouldn't even be an issue. Okay, I think Colonel Joe Adams is back with us here. Welcome back, Colonel Joe Adams with the Washington Guard. Sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened there, but we're happy to have you back. The last we heard was about your grandpa. That was the last word.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is kind of embarrassing. I've known about this for quite a while. When this judge's issue started happening, actually, the inventor of that for disruption was my great grandfather, Sam Adams, who started the Revolutionary War. It was his cousin, John Adams, who was a Federalist, and which actually caused the rift. People don't understand what happened to Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, how they become so enemies later in life. Came in, who was a Federalist, put in place some progressive attorneys to help control the presidency after he left office. So it was his idea. That happened in 1801, and it's continued on to this day. But my family invented placing judges in the right places to interfere. And I apologize as an Adams that happened. And it's kind of probably one of the most embarrassing things that ever happened in my family. So anyway, that's what we're involved in. It's what we're involved in, judicial tyranny. Just for the record, I want to comment the fact that I'm surprised McGregor hasn't. He'll probably jump on the bandwagon. Joe Biden and his administration created the largest act of treason in the history of this country. He did. He brought in 8 to 10 million people. They're not even sure how many. Now, and they say that Donald Trump needs to bring those people back and he can't deport them. Wait a minute. Why didn't somebody step up and stop Joe Biden from bringing them in? He changed the mission statement of the United States. That thin green line is our first line of defense, what they were supposed to be doing. Instead, they were doing diapers and were changing diapers and letting known gang members into this country unvetted, knowingly. They were told to do that. When I was down in Eagle Pass, I saw the Border Patrol come in and with a forklift and raise the fence to let in 2,500 because they were so backed up in processing, and let them into this country and turn them loose. And it's like,
and it's worse than that, Colonel Adams. We have Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela, saying that Joe Biden actually asked him to send their worst criminals here. He wanted Trende Aragua to come here. Now we know it was really the auto pen, but I mean, you're 100% correct. It is absolutely treason against this country.
Well, the biggest ever by a president, that's for sure. Benedict Arnold's nothing compared to Joe Biden. Hey, but the strange thing is, and I can't clarify this, Fox News made ago that they found out now that they're deporting from Venezuela, the Venezuelans, the trans, whatever they are actually proxies of the Venezuelan government.
Oh, of course.
What?
Of course. I mean, does that surprise you? Colonel Adams, I hate to interrupt, but I have some breaking news. Now, I think that you'll find this interesting because it's very relevant to what we were just talking about. We were talking about these district judges thinking that they are above and beyond the presidential executive power. Well, you know what Signalgate is. I'm sure you've heard about. I know you've been very busy, so I don't know if you do or don't. I think you do.
I'm on Signalgate.
I just saw the breaking news that Judge Boasberg, the judge we've been talking about, the one who is trying to keep Trump from deporting people through that Enemies Alien Act, he is now the judge that's been appointed to Signalgate, to the investigation over Signalgate. I thought that was pretty interesting. You just can't make this stuff up, can you?
Yeah, good luck with that one. Gee, go figure, right? Didn't see that one coming. Whatever. It's a clown act. So anyway, but whatever they can do to hurt him.
That's right. That's right. It is so funny. Yes, you just froze for only a second.
Okay. The Democrats are involved in a revolution counter to our original revolution. They're involved in they want to change the face of America to control the power and the money, especially all the kickback money that, of course, that Musk has found. Now, Musk made a statement about Social Security, the fact that it's a Ponzi scheme. That's the best description that I can give. The guy's a genius because the money's not there. They have taken our Social Security. They taxed my money, and then I pay into Social Security. The Democrats want to tax it when they give it back to me. Tax. But at the same time, there's not enough. If they had to pay out all the Social Security today to all the people that's paid into it, it's not there because they've used it for other reasons. I didn't give them my money to give to some people overseas or some project that pays nothing back. No, I worked for that and I deserve it. But a Ponzi scheme, we know eventually is going to fail. The numbers are there. Eventually, Social Security will fail. So people get your money while you can. Now, when that fails, what's going to happen? Financial revolution, financial civil war? No. Face the facts. We're on bar.
That is.
It's going to fail.
It is. And what are people going to do when that happens? Now I still have a little bit of faith that through Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency that we will be bringing money back into the country. We've got Donald Trump's gold card, which, by the way, he brought in $5 billion in one day by literally selling citizenship, for $5 million a pop. And, what a great plan, an ingenious plan that was. I think that somehow, now, of course, they want to eliminate taxes, income taxes for anyone who makes under $150,000 a year. I think, Colonel Adams, they are going to find a way under Trump to make sure the American people are okay, with or without Social Security, to make sure we are okay.
You got more faith in them than I do. So,
well, if it weren't Donald Trump, I wouldn't. But I think under Donald Trump, he's going to make sure that the American people are taken care of, even the people who don't like him. If it weren't him in office and whoever comes along after him, that's why it's so important. I mean, we're 3.5 years away from election time, but it's time to start thinking ahead unless you want AOC to be running this country.
Can you imagine that?
No. I'll be the one packing my bags and moving.
We're still on the verge of a civil war or a revolution. Revolutions against the government. And if they get back in power with their same destiny or their objectives, you're looking at a revolution. I don't doubt down the road that the civil war or revolution, whatever you want to call it, will be between the Republicans and the Democrats. The Democrats are nuts, and they're hell bent on destroying this country. They hate America and what we stand for. Bernie Sanders is a Marxist. AOC, she's right in line. I mean, this is their leadership. They're a joke, but
Yes.
they're dangerous. So you people out there think that everything's fine now and Donald Trump's going to straighten things out. It's like my buddy Mark McCloskey said, don't become complacent. This is
Well,
only the
that's
beginning.
sure. Yeah, we cannot become complacent. There's no question about it. We have to keep fighting because, even though Donald Trump is in office now, you know what? His term is limited. We have to start thinking about what the next steps are. And more importantly, Colonel Adams, I've been doing a lot of thinking lately, which can be scary sometimes. But more importantly, we have to make sure we are okay ourselves. We've got to take sometimes the government out of the picture, and we have to start making sure we at our home base that we're self-sufficient, we're working in the right direction individually. Because if you individually find a way to be self-sufficient, find a way where you don't need the government in your life, then guess what? You don't really have to worry about it quite as much.
I've spent most of my adult life getting ready for this because I got saturated in the intelligence industry. I saw it with the inevitable. This country is almost a Ponzi scheme. Eventually, there's going to be problems. So then that's why I organized the Washington Guard and stay with that creed. That's the creed of the Washington Guard. Be ready to be on your own at some given time. And so, if everybody was prepared as my family, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. I just say, bring it. Okay, let's just get it over. Let's get it over with. Let's just go now. But and you've got these crazy, power-hungry Democrats out there. There might become a time, if in fact this happens, especially the one trigger that they want to pull off, they want to kill Donald Trump.
Yes, they do.
High ups in the intelligence world says, well, right now there's people running around in groups trying to figure out how to kill Donald Trump. If that happens, it's on, baby. I mean, it is on. This society will be thrown into chaos, and you will be on your own for a given matter of time. So, if they get him, and they want to, and there's people planning on doing it, believe me, and he knows it, it's on. Now, it might even get to a time, if you're a known Democrat, you will not be allowed to walk down the street safely. And they bring it up. Now go to gun shows. In fact, when there's a note about it before, a high up Democrat head in Franklin County came to a gun show, and I frankly told him, you need to leave for your own good. You need to leave. These people know who you are, and they don't like you. Right. I've got a security clearance. I go, these people don't care. So that's just a tip. So this guy was not comfortable, viewed likely by the people at the gun show in charge of security. So that's just a sign of what's on this trail, and they will. The Patriots take matters in their own hands and go after them. The only reason they do these things because they know they can get away with it. The only reason they say these things, these treasonous things, is because they know they can get away with it.
Yes.
If somebody sends them a message, really, that's how you feel about this country, things will change. Things will change.
No question. And things, Colonel Adams, we all have to try to do our best to make sure there is some type of change because things are getting ugly. I really don't think that people are safe right now. And that's kind of a big statement to make, but I really don't. I'm worried about people that I know, my family, my friends. I don't think we're safe because these people are willing to harm us. They don't care if they go to prison or not. They just don't care.
Well, they think they can be protected. People who mess with other people usually have too much time on their hands. But if they weren't doing what they're doing now, they would have no platform. Because any proper platform or progressive platform, I shouldn't say progressive. Progressive turned into a dirty word. but anything good for this country, they're just the opposite. And people follow that. I mean, when they say that 70% of the people are these gang members in all the country, 30% says it's a bad idea. It's 30%, and what in the hell is wrong with them? They're, I mean, these people, I say, lunatics. They make me sick. Here's the big post office. For years, for decades, I've said we need to privatize the post office. Now I'm going to tell you a story that you're not going to believe. So I did a kind of minor investigation when I was still a PI, the post office. So a young girl came to me who's a letter carrier, and she says, I have to go public. And I said, well, didn't I see you on TV? She goes, well, that was me, but they had her behind a screen and changed her voice. So she said that the post office in St. Louis is so corrupt that the women at her post office were forced to join a sex club.
Oh my goodness.
Inside the post office. Yeah. And the ones who didn't cooperate with the sex club, the good routes, they would sabotage. We had sorters inside the post office that put all the mail together for one street or whatever. So they intentionally would sabotage the letter carriers if they didn't cooperate with their sex club. Now that's how upsetting inside the post office. And I mean, there's just and I'm sure if it happens in St. Louis, it's happening all over the country, and they get away with it.
Who would have ever thought? I mean, that is so crazy to even think about. It is so crazy. And Colonel Adams, I'm not trying to be rude to these people, but have you seen, your local USPS carrier, the people who work in these facilities? I mean, what kind of sex club was this? I mean, awful is what it is. Just awful.
It was, I think Channel 5 had her on, disguised, and nothing came of it. Here's the problem with the post office. You can hire them, but you can't fire them.
Right.
So when they hire people that are incompetent, don't want to be there, they can't get rid of them. That's the problem. Also, during COVID, for 2 weeks, we didn't get any mail at the house when I lived in St. Louis. No mail. So the HOA came to me and said, hey, have you got any mail? No. The neighbors, no mail, no mail. So I go to the post office. Every delivery truck for the letter carriers was in the parking lot. And this is the middle of the day. I'm like, what's going on here? So I go inside and ask for this retired sergeant major that I knew. He's a supervisor. He comes out and he goes, oh, hi, Colonel, how you doing? I said, good. Actually, where in the hell is Hampton Park's mail? They won't deliver it. They won't deliver it. Yes, it is. So the letter carriers got together and said, if we deliver mail, you're risking our lives, our health. So we're not delivering the mail.
I remember when that happened. I was your near neighbor back then during that time, and I remember when it happened.
So I told the sergeant major, I said, Sergeant Major, go back there and separate that mail and give me my community's mail, which is like 77 homes right there at the corner of Clayton and Hanley. He said, well, I'm not allowed to do that. And I said, Sergeant Major, get the mail now. Yes, sir. So he actually went back and sorted the mail, got Hampton Park's mail. I brought it back out and delivered it to Hampton Park. But but instead of being fired, they said, no, you're risking our health. We're under a national health alert. We're not delivering the mail. So for 2 weeks, no mail. So I became the letter carrier.
And probably did a better job.
But no,
there's some really good letter carriers out there. I know there are. But you're right.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we had a great letter carrier here. She brings stuff. My driveway is a tenth of a mile long to even get to the house on my private street. And sometimes she has a questionable package or whatever, she brings it up to the house. we've got a mailbox, a tenth of a mile away. Now they're great people. Then you've got other letter carriers when she's not on duty that I'll find my mail at the back of the house or the side of the house, and the package is in the driveway.
Yeah, they're
I
not
mean,
definitely not all good. And
anyway.
you're right. That is where government workers go to stay for a lifetime career, because once you get hired, you never get fired. Yes.
Especially a vet, because that civil service that he's working goes to his retirement. The guy gets out in 12 years and works 12 years in the post office. He's under full benefits, you can't get rid of him. If I hired, and I've hired several people to work for me that didn't
Right.
work out, I fire them.
That's
Post
right.
office can't do
That
it.
is right. And I get it. I have rural mail
They
at
gave
my
you, and so
area,
many
and
people are
it is
unemployed.
definitely hit or miss. No question about it. And Colonel Adams, anything else on your mind today? Anything else?
I guess I'm supposed to keep talking. I think you said anything else on my mind today.
Yeah, sorry. I think we're freezing up a little bit.
Yeah. Here's the great thing of the week, right? The F-47, our new fighter jet. Not only is Donald Trump like a Ronald Reagan and is beefing up our military and putting the proper military leaders in position, that F-47, I wish they would have called it the FT-47. Anyway, that keep a few Democrats awake at night to name the new aircraft subliminally after our president. No, that's about all. Let's see what else I got. And don't worry about Iran getting a nuclear weapon. Trump's not going to put up with that.
That'll never happen. Well, we will wipe Iran off the map before they'll ever allow that to happen.
Yeah. And let's see, that's revolution. That's about all I got for today. God bless everybody. Hi, Mary. Is Allison back on there? I haven't seen
She
Allison.
popped in to say hello. I'm not sure if she's still around or not.
Okay. All right. Anyway, hey, thanks for having me on. I'll see you next Wednesday if I'm still alive. And remember, when you join the Washington Guard, you're not alone.
That's right.
So thank you very much, Patriots.
Thank you, Colonel Joe Adams, for joining us today. We will look forward to seeing you next week. Colonel Joe Adams with the Washington Guard, patriot of all patriots. So happy to have him join us this morning, as always, on a Wednesday. He is absolutely fantastic. So much to talk about. I love having Colonel Joe Adams on. I know if there's something you need to know, that's the man to ask. And I love the Washington Guard. I absolutely love the Washington Guard. And it was good to see Allison pop through as well, now that their work has been completed. Man, they are hard at work, aren't they, in the neighborhoods, working on storm cleanup. And now, of course, we have the situation. We have another storm system coming through. I don't think it's supposed to be nearly what this last storm system was. But man, Jay says USPS lost $9.5 billion last year. And also, USPS has outlived its usefulness. And Mary said, years ago, I had a very energetic friend who took a temporary Christmas season job at the post office. He was told to slow down because he was making them look bad, the other workers who weren't quite as quick and efficient. Man, I'll tell you, I've had my problems with the U.S. Postal Service over the years. No question about it. Slow mail, no mail being delivered at different places, packages going missing. It happened here. I had some packages coming and they didn't show up. And our post office here is very tiny. And I called. They're like, oh, I know exactly where they were. They went out, they got the packages, and they came back and brought them to me. So there's, I guess, some good that comes with a rural post office. Our post office here, where I live right now, is pretty darn good. Haven't had any problems here. But when I lived over in Clayton, not too far from Colonel Adams there, boy, it was tough. I'll tell you, it was tough. We had a different postal carrier. And look at the theft that's going on within the Postal Service. Do you remember not long ago here in St. Louis, there was a female that was arrested and she had stolen, tens of thousands of dollars out of the mail, in different, gift cards and different things that were coming through. Pretty crazy stuff. So, good to see Colonel Joe Adams on today. And, I meant to talk to him a little bit more about Signalgate, but we didn't really get into it as much. But I do want to see what fallout comes out of Signalgate as we learn more and hear more. And I know Donald Trump is backing up Pete Hegseth. I know he's backing up National Security Advisor Mike Walls, but I think this could turn into something a little crazier. I don't think they're going to let it go quite so easily. Now we have, of course, Judge Boasberg, the breaking news that came through today, who's going to be heading, over the case in regards to that, because it's spiraling quickly. I think that there are better ways for our officials to communicate than social media apps. I mean, even though it's Signal, it's supposed to be completely encrypted, that no one, even the FBI allegedly, can break through that encryption. But you don't need that when you have people on your own committee, your own team sabotaging you. How in the world did Mike Walls, one of his assistants, add this guy from the Atlantic news publication? That makes no sense at all. And of course, that guy went out and wrote about it. His name is Jeffrey Goldberg. You can go out and read the article he wrote based on being part of this Signal chat with all of these major players in our government. And again, Tulsi Gabbard saying nothing classified was revealed. And I don't, from what I've seen that came out of Signalgate, all the information that was going back and forth is the same stuff we were seeing with our own eyes, because everybody has a camera right now. Houthis have cameras. Our service people have cameras. There's news people everywhere. They're reporting everything that's happening as it happens. There's really no way anymore to keep anything secret. So I don't think there was probably anything said on the Signal chat that really made that much of a difference or violated our national security or put us in any kind of danger. However, oh, Jay says it was what you're right, Jay. 100% a setup. Absolutely. Jay says, yet again, Signalgate won't go anywhere. I hope it doesn't. I really like Mike Walls. I really do. I really like Pete Hegseth. I don't want it to go anywhere. I don't want anything to happen, but we know Judge Boasberg is going to do every single thing he can. Everything he can. He was pointed to this case for a reason. That's to try to take Hegseth down. Of course, we have Hakeem Jeffries writing a letter to Pete Hegseth telling him that he should, or to the president, I should say. He wrote the letter to the president saying that Hegseth should be removed and prosecuted and all this other crazy stuff. But the point is that they really should not be using an app to talk. There are other ways to go about formal discussions when it comes to military operations, not an app. Even if you think it's safe, now you see that it can potentially be sabotaged. So you just don't do it. But it's like Donald Trump said, it's a lesson learned. And he feels that they have adequately learned their lessons and that moving forward, they will find a better way, a safer way to communicate. Maybe that's to go out to the old Patriot tree, right? Have a little talk around the tree. We're getting to the point where it's difficult to communicate without some type of sabotage. Even the most secure email can be hacked. We know that the government databases can be hacked. There's a lot of things. There's really no safe place. And the only thing I can think is that Mike Walls and Pete Hegseth and Tulsi Gabbard and all the other folks in that Signal chat probably thought, this is safer than email that can be hacked. It's safer than a phone conversation, which again can be hacked or wiretapped. And, I think they probably saw Signal as the safer option between those two. But lesson learned, there is no safe option. There is just no safe option. So I wanted to make sure we talk about, I thought this was kind of funny that Donald Trump, he revoked the Secret Service that detailed for Mayorkas. Isn't that funny? Every time I hear that he has curtailed the security services for one of these criminals, I just laugh. It's so funny. Mayorkas should not have secret security detail. He just shouldn't have it. He doesn't deserve it. He's the one who allowed these people, these terrorists, to come into our country. He shouldn't have. Who does he need protection from? He doesn't want the rest of us to have any protection. And I thought this was funny too, that the State Department denied a passport renewal for, guess who? Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci tried to renew his passport. State Department said, not so fast, not so fast. Your pardon, is revoked and you're not going nowhere. So that I think that's going to happen. Some other things going on in the news outside of the craziness. Jay, the Atlantic is 100% anti-Trump, which is why this journalist supposedly added is very, that Jay, I know that before you joined us today, that's exactly what I was talking about. I used to know the editor in chief. He hired me to recruit, because I used to be a recruiter for publications. I hired publishers and editors back in the day, before I started working in the security business, and a long, long, long time ago. And I knew the editor in chief for the Atlantic, and he was a fantastic person. However, he went on to head a Dolan Media Group, which is a group of legal publications. A super, super nice guy. But yes, the publication is beyond liberal. And that's why, how could somebody on Mike Walls's team potentially let a reporter, a journalist from the Atlantic onto that chat? It absolutely was a setup. I hope that Mike Walls has dealt with this person appropriately. They quite honestly should be charged with treason, because that's exactly what they did. You don't allow you did, and maybe Mike Wallace shouldn't have allowed anyone to be added. Maybe they should have been paying more attention to how many people were actually on there. And not only that, but an MI6 agent made their way onto the chat line as well, which is pretty darn crazy. So that, this one, a couple more things I want to talk about. I'm trying to figure out which one to talk about first. I'm going to talk about this one first. 23andMe. I'm sure most of you are familiar with 23andMe. It's an online database for DNA. I'm sure you've heard that they've filed for bankruptcy. Well, this is a much bigger deal than what some people think. A lot of you understand the danger that this poses. But think about this. Your DNA, whether or not you submitted a test or not, is held by 23andMe. You didn't have to submit any DNA to 23andMe for your DNA to be in their database. And what's really crazy about this situation is they're going to be up for sale to the highest bidder. I have talked to you guys many times in the past, hypothetical situations, thinking about, well, gosh, how far can they go with DNA, accusing you of crimes? They can use a deep fake to show you on video. They can plant your DNA evidence. And somebody says, well, how do they have your DNA? Well, they have your DNA through these different types of companies. And there's a lot of facets to this bankruptcy with 23andMe. And one of those facets is that somebody's going to buy your DNA. And, now 23andMe, excuse me, they're saying, well, you can go in and delete your DNA. If you're a member of 23andMe, go in and you cannot ever delete your DNA. They're just saying that they want you to feel better about the situation. Your DNA is in their database. You can't delete it. Not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And somebody is going to buy that DNA, and they're going to have a bank of DNA that's going to include you. Because let's just say, even though you didn't submit DNA, let's say your third cousin, fourth cousin, sixth cousin, somebody you don't even know, never met, somebody lives all the way across the country, maybe all the way across the world, they submitted their DNA. Well, through familial DNA, analogy, they can go back and they can connect that person to you and basically decipher your own DNA code. So it doesn't matter that you didn't submit your own DNA. They have your DNA. I doubt there's anyone in this world, or at least in this country, who is not part of their database just in some family tree, familial DNA way. And I kind of joked, a friend of mine who was an FBI agent messaged me the other day with two different things. I'm going to talk about the next one, here next. And he and I share stories quite a bit. And one of the things that he told me was, and he and I have talked a lot about cold cases. Some of you know, I've been too busy to do it lately, but I've written a crime blog for a very long time now, for several years. And I haven't done as much of it lately because I'm just busy. And I write a lot about serial killers. And something that I've written quite a bit about, if any of you have read any of my writings, is how DNA plays a role in solving cold cases. And for those of you who do know, which hopefully it's a lot of you at this point, there's a group they call Parabon Nanolabs. They're just one of, a couple people who are doing this now, but it started with Parabon Nanolabs. What they were doing is they were being hired to solve cold cases. And police officers, detectives, investigators, they would get a sample of somebody's DNA. Sometimes maybe not through the best means, by pretending to be somebody they weren't, but they would get a sample of this DNA. And, they would send in a DNA sample and say it was their own. And then they would have this lab, like 23andMe or GED Match, go through their database and try to find, build a family tree based on this DNA. Then the police could go through and kind of make their way down to whoever their suspect is. They've solved a lot of cases. I remember when they had their first 100 cases that they tried to solve through familial DNA. Now, of course, we have Parabon nanolabs now. Now, Parabon, gosh, I just can't talk. Parabon nanolabs, they do the same thing. They partner with companies like GED Match and 23andMe. And what they do is they do the same thing. You know, the investigator submits the DNA to Parabon Nanolabs. They have a woman there named Cece Moore. And what she does is she goes through and she builds the family tree. And then they eliminate until they get down to the person who is the perpetrator. They have solved so many cases this way. And it was kind of funny that is hopefully doesn't go to the wayside with the sale of 23andMe, because they were one of the companies that did work pretty well with police officers and investigators in solving these cold cases, as does GED Match. But there's a lot of backlash from the public over this, if you guys recall, where people were saying, oh, no, I don't want my DNA used to solve crimes. Why? I surely don't know, unless you've committed the crime. I just don't know. And so anyway, if it gets sold to the highest bidder, what's going to happen to that DNA? We don't know. But my FBI friend was joking. He's like, maybe Elon Musk needs to buy 23andMe, you know, when it goes up for auction, if it goes up for auction, or try to, you know, sort it out as they file for bankruptcy. And maybe he needs to use the database to identify all of these serial rapists, serial killers, you know, people who have committed crimes. Could you imagine if that happened? I thought, you know what a great idea that is. If Elon Musk owned 23andMe, think of all the crimes that would be solved. He could take all of those DNA samples that the government doesn't have time to test or won't spend the money to test, put them right through the system instead of fighting through all the legal jargon to test all that DNA. Man, we'd solve some good crimes. Good morning, Tammy. Tammy asked, how did my PET scan go? Well, Tammy, I do have my results, and I'm not going to go over it again just because I don't want to bore everyone. But I did talk about at the beginning of the show, my test results were not good. And I'll talk about that again here just for a second before we head out today. But I did talk about it at depth earlier, if you guys want to go back and see that. Not kind of boring, but at least tells you what's going on. And got some changes to the show coming up, which I'll talk about here in a few minutes. Well, my FBI friend also sent me this other little tidbit of information, and he was talking about Kash Patel, of course, being the FBI director. He's looking to fire 1,000 ATF agents. Now, you might think that's a bad thing. Well, if you're an FBI agent, you think it's a great thing because they've hindered, you know, the investigations of, unfortunately, you know, I'm not saying that ATF agents are bad, but there are things ATF agents are tasked with that are bad, that go against you, that are raiding your home, looking for weapons, that are trying to punish you for having guns, or putting you through checks you don't necessarily have to go through checks for. And the system with these jurisdictional task forces, the ATF, you know, it's been a big problem. And so I think a lot of people are looking forward to losing a few of those ATF agents. Now, the ATF agents, I'm not saying they're bad people by any means. And I am sure they will find other work in other sectors of law enforcement. But I think that what I see Kash Patel doing is absolutely fantastic. I love every single minute of it, and I can't wait to see what happens with the with the ATF agents. And I feel bad wishing for any law enforcement officer to lose their job, because there are some really good ones out there as well. But unfortunately, the government has weaponized the ATF against us. There's no question that that's the truth. They've weaponized them against us. And so by eliminating potentially 1,000 ATF agents, that just means there's less weaponization of the government and law enforcement against us. So think about it in that terms. The good guys and gals who work for the ATF agent, guess what? They're going to go, the ATF agency, I should say, they're going to go out and they're going to find other jobs in law enforcement. See it as a positive thing. Oh, it's okay, Tammy. You know, most people don't skip until a little bit later either way. So I know most of you guys were not here in the morning when I was talking about my PET scan. My results were not good. You know, things from here to about here are pretty messed up. But you know what? We're going to move forward and see what's going on. And I've got a lot of testing ahead of me. And the way I see it is that, you know, a lot of things can make a PET scan go wrong. You know, they call it SUV uptake. and I had a lot of hyper metabolic activity in, I'll just kind of recap, in my thyroid and primarily in a lymph node, the right paratracheal lymph node, which I expected that to happen. And then kind of some uptake through my brain into my something or another salivary glands, and pretty much all the way down. And so, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything bad. It sounds way worse than probably what it is. And if you know anything about these PET scans, which I know very little, but I'm learning a lot, is that there's a lot of things that can cause hypermetabolic uptake when you get a PET scan. It can be inflammation, it can be autoimmune, it can certainly be malignancy as well. So, I've got I have to go and get 2 MRIs, a non-contrast and a full contrast on the brain. I've got to get a ultrasound on my thyroid, and I'm going to have a biopsy on that lymph node. But the good news is the nodules in my lungs that I originally went to be seen for, they had no uptake at all. So, so there's something positive that comes out of it. I was wondering why I've been having a bad headache for like the past month, but either way, it'll be okay. It will definitely be okay. Robert says, look into Gary Brecka regarding genetics. Yeah, I am so fascinated by genetics, and particularly the crime solving aspect in the genetic field. I feel like I really missed my calling. I would have loved to have worked for one of these places like Parabon Nanolabs, where you're taking the DNA from a crime scene and running it through the system and building that family tree and then narrowing it down, to who it could or couldn't be. And I've studied it quite extensively. I've written about it a lot, and it's just beyond fascinating to me. But it also, the flip side of that is that there are entities out there who know a lot about us. And the problem is, I might joke about Elon Musk purchasing 23andMe, and solving crimes. We got to really think about the reality of the situation. What if China bought 23andMe? They buy up all kinds of these different companies. What if a BlackRock? I kid you not, I will absolutely fall over if we hear that BlackRock has purchased 23andMe. I really will. It'll be like an episode. What is that show that I used to love? Gosh, speaking of that, it was called, what? I don't remember. Black Mirror. Remember, have you ever seen Black Mirror? It's kind of like the modern day Twilight Zone. If we hear that BlackRock has purchased 23andMe, man, we all better be worried. Every last one of us. So Tammy says, oh, thank you, Tammy. I appreciate the prayers. You can't, hard to be on top of any kind of situation like this. But, I was talking a lot about in the beginning of the show that, the route I'm taking is anti-inflammatory, anti-parasite. I think that we're poisoning our bodies. I talked about that a lot this morning. I'm not going to get, into it right now, but something I'm going to be talking about a lot on the show going forward is exactly that, the poison that we're putting into our bodies. Because guess what? Think about yourself as a little rat in a barrel. And if your captors are only giving you poisonous food, how do you escape it? Right. And that's kind of the situation a lot of us are in. If you're not growing your own food, if you're not getting your meat and poultry from a farmer direct from the source, then you know what? You're that mouse in the barrel, and you're the one that they're feeding the poison to, and you can't escape it. So we've all got to start thinking a little bit better. And Lori says, please purchase the book, How to Starve Cancer, not jumping the gun. Yeah, I'm not jumping into any conclusions right now. That's for sure, because it can be so many other things. I quite honestly feel like the chances of it being like the C word are very, very slim. I'm not at high risk at all for that. No immediate family members, nothing in my, background would lead me to believe that, except for that maybe COVID. I still believe not just the vaccine, but I really do believe that COVID is a bioweapon. And I believe that anyone that was infected, this is just my own personal belief system. That's all it is. I believe that anyone that was affected with COVID at some point or another ended up with this bioweapon in your body. Now, what that bioweapon is, what it does, what it interacts with, I don't personally know. There's probably people who do know, but I think that it was created, man-made, in the Wuhan lab. They created it to use it as a bioweapon against the population, likely to depopulate the world, and then they released it. Did they release it on accident? Did they release it on purpose at the Wuhan lab? I don't know. But I do think that it's not just the vaccine that's causing these terrible cancers in people. I also think it's just COVID itself. And, if you think about it, they put COVID in the vaccine. So, you know what that tells me, or at least, again, this is just my personal opinion. There's no evidence to back this up. But I kind of feel like what they did with that vaccine is they said, okay, for those of you who might not naturally get COVID, we're just going to put it in this vaccine. And then we're going to have you come in and we're going to mandate this vaccine. So those of you who would not naturally have a reaction to the COVID, or would not naturally contract the COVID, we're going to make sure we not only give it to you once, but we're going to give it to you multitude of times through this vaccination, so we can make sure that COVID, that bioweapon, is in your body. I might sound like the craziest person on the planet. I probably do quite often, but that is absolutely how I feel. Robert says, cancer is a germ. Yeah, I am one of those people who believes that cancer is parasitic. At least most forms of cancer is parasitic. And so my route of therapy, whether I have results or not going forward, and I get all these tests done, is anti-parasitic, anti-inflammatory. Sugar as well. Sugar is a poison. And, we just got to get away from these grocery stores. We've got to get away from the poison. We can't be that little mouse in the barrel, while our captors feed the food to us because it's convenient. We have to find other ways to break free. Now, I started that journey long before any of this, but I'm going to continue it. My garden wasn't very good last year, so I'm trying to step things up just a little bit. But you know what? It doesn't even have to be my garden. You can go to a farmer's market and buy some really fantastic produce. You can go into a butcher, or, a local butcher that you trust, a local farmer, and purchase your poultry and meat. There are certainly ways that we can all be healthier. You know what? And people say, well, it costs a lot of money. It can. But, most communities have a community garden. You can get, vegetables and fruits and things for free. You just volunteer a few hours of time, and they're going to give you some items out of that garden. Partner with your neighbors. What's wrong with finding a couple of neighbors who want to do a little community garden, and all of you take turns in the success of that garden. And then guess what? That helps, 3, 4 families, however many families you get involved. That's making a pretty big mark, quite honestly. But so one of the things, Robert says, bioweapon makes you transhuman with self-aligning antenna. I'm not sure what that means, Robert. You'll have to explain that to me. I don't know if that means, if that's part of the 5G stuff. But either way, just to touch base, I know it's time to go now, is that I'm not going to be here tomorrow. There'll be no show tomorrow. There'll be no show Friday. I've got to do a little bit of recouping, lots of doctor's appointments to make, but I will be back on Monday. The show's going to change a tiny bit. I'm only going to be on for 1 hour. I've got to give my body a little bit of a break, and we'll see how things go moving forward. But so starting next Monday, I'm going to be on from 8 to 9 a.m. Quite honestly, that's enough for a podcast. Nobody probably wants to hear me blather on for more than an hour anyway. And I'll be a little bit more focused on certain topics if we're only, doing an hour. Still have guests planned. We're working things out in the detail. We're going to talk a lot more about health than I probably normally would. We're still going to talk about politics. Politics is my thing. News is my thing, but we're also going to be talking about health. And I'm going to also, in addition to doing that 1 hour show, I'm going to be doing some separate things too, talking about gardening, talking about homesteading, talking about chickens and different things that I've got going on in my life that a lot of you have going on in your life too. That'll be separate from this show. But we're going to do a lot of different things. So I see it all moving in a very positive direction. But I need, unfortunately, I've just got to give myself a little bit of rest in the mornings because I don't sleep. I've been up, since 3 a.m. this morning, and I didn't go to bed till midnight. So I don't sleep much. I just got to try to give myself a little bit of a break because your body heals when it rests. If you don't give yourself time to rest, then it's really difficult to heal as I kind of work through whatever's going on. But I'm very positive about it because positivity, believe it or not, staying positive is the most potent medicine you can have, right? Is positive energy and positive thoughts and of course, prayers. And other than that, well, thank you, Joe. I appreciate that. And let's see here. You only shop on the outside aisle of the store. Yeah, that's what they tell you to do. And I think it's a good plan. And thank you, Tammy, for your support as always. Well, guys, that's it for me today. Again, I'm going to be posting, since if I'm not going to be here doing a show tomorrow and Friday, I'm just going to take that time and I'm going to be posting a lot of stuff on social media, on X and on Facebook. And we'll still be getting the news out there because it's breaking every minute. But otherwise, I'll be touching base with you guys on Monday morning. I'm actually kind of looking forward to the changes in the show. I think it'll be a good thing for all of us because you know what? Life isn't about just politics and news. It's about so many other things. So we're going to kind of break things up a little bit. Politics and news will always be my number one, but we're going to break things up a little bit, trying to make us all a little bit healthier in the process as I go through this crazy journey that's ahead of me. And yeah, Lori, positivity, it is absolutely everything. It really is. I really do believe a positive attitude, positive thoughts, not allowing those negative thoughts to get in is everything. It can change everything. And it's a longer story than I'm going to go into today, but I also think that's how prayer works. You're putting all that energy into a thought process, we'll talk about that another day. But either way, I hope you guys have yes, Robert, I am definitely going to get some sun. I hope you guys all have a great day. I hope you have a great couple days. And I will look forward to talking to you all on Monday. Have a good week, everyone. And I will see you then. I'm Tabitha Hassell with Tabs on Tap.